What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court for today, Monday, December 12th, 2022, 12/12/22, all the twos. I'm your host, Sean Murphy. And speaking of twos, my duo is back. My boy, Jeff. Jeff, you're back from dying.
Yeah.
How's that?
It was fun.
Scale 1 to 10, what would you give it?
No, I'd give it about a 7.2. No,
7.2? Okay, that's
no, it was
fair.
terrible, man. I hate not being here for you guys. On top of that, too, doing the morning show, I didn't feel right. I'm 100% healthy now. I'm ready to go. Still was watching Pistons games. I just couldn't dissect it like I wanted to, but
Yeah, you were like,
still.
yeah, you were pretty much like going to the show, going home,
Yeah.
sleeping, rinse and repeat, right?
I slept last week from about 5 p.m. till 6 a.m. the next morning, and
Dude,
that was I think I missed the Mavericks game actually that night. I
man.
woke up and I'm like, hold up, let me go rewatch some of this stuff back. Like I slept through it completely, but I'm happy to be back. I'm excited.
Yeah, dude, and you slept through the one game that was, really good of
I
late.
know,
Anyway,
I know,
yeah, Jeff, we are here
I
to
know.
talk about Detroit Pistons because even though they are currently sitting at 7-22 at this current point, there still is a lot to dissect and a lot to discuss. And with that, the Athletic did their recent NBA grades, and the Detroit Pistons got their worst grade of a D minus. And I can understand the reasoning. I think there's some validity, to the fact that this season has not by any stretch of the imagination gone the way that NBA pundits would probably have expected, the way what you and I have expected before
Right.
this season, Jeff. But let's get into like kind of like our report card of like what this season has been, how things have gone, how things can get better, and like we can kind of dissect and talk about some things. Let's start with as a whole. Jeff, I want to start with you. What grade would you give the Detroit Pistons given the circumstances,
Yeah.
the expectations, and the overall product that you've seen on the court?
I would say, well, like you said, taking into consideration the injuries, which affected them early on in the year. I mean, you're waiting on Bagley and Burks to get back, and then boom, Cade's out, Isaiah Stewart's out, Sadiq's missed games, Ivy's missed games. So again, ton of injuries. There was some performances over the last couple weeks that you could say definitely a stretch of games where you've liked and they've competed and they've done exactly what we've hoped they do. But throughout the season, you've also seen those performances where you'd almost just want to completely erase from your memory. So taking all that into consideration, I'd probably say I'd probably give them a C minus. I think if
Mhm.
you're talking C as an average, I mean, with all the stuff they've dealt with, I think they've handled it. I mean, you've seen player progression, Killian Hayes turning his season around. Ivy's been struggling getting back from that knee injury, but still, nonetheless, I've liked things I've seen, but also some other things that frustrated me. I mean, from a coaching perspective, even though I think Dwayne, I give him a lot of credit for how he's handled this lineup, being guys really not being available, especially Cade. I mean, your franchise player. But yeah, I'm going to say C minus, just with everything. It's still incomplete. I mean, plenty of season left, but at this very point, I mean, you're 7-22. I'll say C minus. I think that's pretty friendly.
Yeah, I think that's pretty friendly as well. And I think I think it's a fair grade. I was going along the same lines of I think I think C plus. Given the circumstances overall, because I think you look at if you are losing a lot of games, what do you want to see in those losses? And I think you want to see for one, you want to see a more you want to see as competitive of a loss as you can. You want to see
Right.
development, within those losses. You want to see growth, as the team goes on. And when a team does finally get a win, like you want it to be, against opponents of value. And the Pistons, to their credit, they have had some pretty good, pretty decent wins on their resume thus far this season. I think just the big problem has been, no matter how many times this team fights back, no matter, how great of a game Bojan can have, no matter, how much Sadiq can step up, as great as Jaden Ivey is, as awesome as Jalen Duren can be, as good as Marvin Bagley's been ever since he's come off of injury, this team is just not the same when Cade Cunningham is on the sidelines. And, like to me, obviously, there's decisions that you can argue. There's certain things you can nitpick with the rotation and with minutes and with Dwayne Casey. And like again, I understand, frustrations and criticisms, and I absolutely agree that we can be critical of things that he's done.
Right.
But to call for anyone's jobs or major changes or to, make any diversion from the plan that's been laid in front of Detroit, I just don't see any reason because, for one, if there is a lottery to, have the best odds in, this is the one. I'm not saying again that that's Detroit's focus, but if Cade Cunningham is going to be out due to injury, then that's not a bad silver lining to have.
Right.
In addition, the young players are playing well and guys are developing and getting better. Saddiq Bey had a pretty promising performance tonight, was shooting better from beyond the arc, ever since switching to the bench, himself. I feel like he's actually brought a lot of value to that second unit, even with Marvin Bagley as well, switching to the bench.
Right.
Him, Burks, and Bey coming off the bench for Detroit. That second unit might now be their strength when at the beginning of the season it was their weakness. So when you look at when you're actually watching the games and seeing, okay, how is this team evolving? How is this team getting better? There are things, right? It's just, it's not always the most glamorous. Detroit, over the last 10 games, I believe they're 3-7. A couple days ago, they were at 4-6, with that mark. They've, overall haven't really had many double-digit losses of late. The only ones they've had, the only teams they've really had double-digit losses to in the past month, Jeff, have been the Grizzlies and the Knicks. And if you were to ask me, hey, Sean, what are the two teams the Pistons struggle against the most? For some reason, it's the Knicks and it's the Grizzlies. So, to me, to be honest with you, I'm not extremely surprised, but at the same time, again, I still think there's a lot to be happy about. Mm-hmm. It's just not exciting when you're franchise guys, in street clothes instead of a jersey,
That's a pretty big deal, especially when a guy like Cade goes out. I think your focus, at least for me, and I think you'd agree with me here, is you look to player development. And for a lot of the young guys like Duren, I think everyone could be happy with what they've seen out of Duren, Ivey, Killian, like I mentioned before. Like you said, Saddiq's coming along over the last couple games. There's certainly a lot of guys you could look at, and then the veterans as well. Burks has been playing really well. Bojan, of course, we've seen Bojan night in, night out. But from those players, the guys you want to see, improve, we've seen that as well. So again, that's just another part of it. When I talk about player progression, it's not just Killian. There's other guys as well. So
yeah,
and I think you hit on the other points. So there's still some things to look forward to. I mean,
yeah,
it's not
for sure. And with that,
of a season.
Yeah, and with that, that positive thing on the topic of player development, I think overall, I think we'll give that a B plus, or I would give that a B plus or A minus this season, just because if you look at the evolution of what Killian's done from his first 10 games to now, he's almost a completely different player.
Completely.
If you look at how Jaden Ivey's, played from the beginning of the season, yeah, he's gone through a little bit of a slump, but he's even had a good performance tonight against the Lakers. I think he's a player that, has looked more ready for the NBA game than anyone's expected. And the fact that he's among the top of rookie leaderboards in a lot of statistics is pretty damn impressive. Is Benedict Mathurin playing better? Yes. But Jeff, didn't you and I talk about during the draft and all summer long that Benedict Mathurin's a guy that could probably come in the NBA day one and be pretty polished and ready to go?
Mm-hmm. He's a great shooter, and he's a good shooter now. Nothing's changed. He can score the basketball, and he's doing that really well. I just think Ivey's game is a little more versatile. He brings a lot of different elements. So to your point, yeah, Ivey's been impressive this season.
Yeah, but he also has shown too, a lot of his game as well was, his athleticism and the benefits that brings. And yes, there are aspects of his game that, his shot needs to be tightened, both at the free throw line, beyond the arc, and in the mid range. I think sometimes his release isn't always consistent, and in the sense of where it releases from and what type of arc his shot has. Sometimes, it just looks unpredictable in that sense. So, I think, the number one thing you need to be a good jump shooter is consistency. And so I think consistency in that sense of his release and his form, I think is going to be a big thing, but also, just that consistency of focus and, communication on the defensive end, just making sure that you're, not missing your rotations, that you're making sure that you're setting up your bigs, to be in positions where they're not being compromised. Because I think that's a lot of times where you see Detroit really getting picked apart is when guys can't, stay in front of their guys, and then bigs are being forced to help. And then that's pulling attention elsewhere. you
Mhm.
know?
And another thing too with Ivy is he has a role now which he didn't expect to have in the beginning of the season. Like he's the focal point. Like he
Hmm.
really night in and night out for opposing defenses. So he's a big part of what the Pistons are doing. So again, he's kind of adapting to that new role, right? In the beginning of the season, he's kind of playing Batman, or excuse me, Robin to Cade's Batman. Now it's the Jaden Ivey show. He's handling how to really take on more of that offensive and defensive burden. So a lot of adjusting going on, especially with their franchise player out. And I think for the most part, you talk about the second unit, which I think has been a huge reason why the Pistons have been in these games. And Ivy, man, he's been at the forefront of that. So Ivy's been impressive all season. If I had to give him a grade, I'd probably give him uh, probably an A minus. If
Yeah.
you want to say, I think I've loved what I've seen out of Ivy. There's certainly things that we thought he could improve on coming out of the draft, and it's kind of the same things now. But overall, like shot selection, those things, I think eventually he's going to figure out.
Mhm.
We've seen the athleticism, we've seen what he can do, his playmaking ability, what he can do defensively, and just his explosiveness. So, and I think he's
Mhm.
been a better shooter for the most part. So, Ivy for me gets an A minus. If
Yeah.
really,
I have an idea for an article, and I think I might write it later this week, and I might even want to do like a full video about this. But to me, watching like John Morant so much, over the past week, especially against the Pistons and Jaden Ivey, I
hmm
think there's a lot, especially like if Jaden Ivey is modeling a lot of his game after John Morant. I think the most dangerous aspect of John Morant's game is that you really can't stop him, because the best part of John Morant's game is that he takes whatever you give him. Like, if you're going to give him like an open look for a shot, he can take it. He's a serviceable jump shooter.
hmm
If you're going to pressure him on the perimeter, he can drive past you if you're not going to have the lane covered. If they're overcommitting, he can dish it out to guys open, right? Like, there's a lot of things that Ivy can do, but there's certain looks and there's certain
yeah.
things that give him trouble. If he really wants to become that threat, it's about being able to have an answer for every look that you're presented. And that's what's going to be the thing that brings him to the next level.
And Sean, to speak to that point too, and I love that you brought up Ja and his ability, especially like Ja's not a guy that doesn't have a significant mid-range shot, right? And he still is able to score at will. And one thing he's utilized is that floater in the lane, which I think
Mm-hmm.
Ivy, if he could implement, you don't need a mid-range shot. I think you like one, but with Ja, he just finds success. He knows how to utilize his athleticism. When guys are sagging off him as he's going to the rim, boom, he hits you with a floater. Now guys
Yeah.
have to go up. I'll just blow by you with my athleticism.
It's not
So
that he needs to be DeMar DeRozan or even
right,
Cade in the mid range.
right,
It's just the threat or the premise that you could score in the mid range, because,
right,
again, it's about what's the most dangerous type of scorer? A 3-level scorer, because a guy that can do it, at any level. And the thing about Ja, you look at the 2 games that the Pistons played, like against him, like first game he went off, obviously was dominant, had 33 points, 10 assists, right? Extremely dominant. Next game, he really wasn't as dominant. He was struggling to shoot the ball, but where was
right.
he getting it done, Jeff? It was with his passing. Another 12, 13 assists that night. Like that, like the special thing about Ja is that he can get into the perimeter. He gets so much attention and traffic and gravity because of his athleticism and his explosion. And because of that, he has such elite vision that he can find anybody on the court. And it might not even be a look that the Pistons expect. And again,
Right.
like we've seen that Ivy has a tendency to be a great, drive and kick playmaker. You know, it's just when he can develop those other aspects of his game, when he can improve that shot beyond the arc, and to your point, add something like a floater or just more to his mid-range game.
Right.
And also, quite frankly, hit your free throws, that'll bring him to the next level. Like
Mhm.
those are really the big things. Like,
Yeah.
protect the ball, hit your free throws, improve your shot. That's gonna take him a long way.
Yeah, especially with how much he's going to get to the line, right? I mean, if you can knock down free throws, to your point, you had a couple points per game. And on top of that, just Ivy overall, with how athletic he is and what he can do, it's all about the game just slowing down a little bit for him, which I think it's done at points. But Dwayne hit on it in the preseason and in the summer league. Like, listen, I love that he goes 100 miles per hour. You just want to tweak it down to about 85. Like, when the game slows down, you won't see the shot selection that frustrates you. You'll see more him being more decisive with, when he's up in the air, and instead of taking a contested jumper or a contested layup, excuse me, he has teammates that can help him out, which he's done that. But there's the balance of finding that. And I think he's going to eventually do that. It's his rookie season. I mean, he's 30 games in, but that's something I think he will develop. When he does, he's going to be even more dangerous. Really.
Yeah, without a doubt. Now, before we get to coaching, I want to touch on Troy Weaver. I want to give him a grade specifically, because I think I want to look at, what he's done so far this season, but also the moves that he made, to prior to this season and how they're working out so far, right? Obviously, the biggest moves that he made were in the draft and trades that were surrounded via the draft. And then the Bojan, acquisition, towards the offseason. So obviously he drafted Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, who both have looked like top 5, top 10 rookies thus far. You can look at, whatever rankings that you want. They're pretty consensus in the conversation.
Right.
And then, you look at the guys that they brought in Nerlens Noel and Alec Burks, and you look at the guys that they let out, or the guys that they, released, like, Frank Jackson. I don't really know where Frank's been. I don't really think he has a role anywhere currently at this present time. But Jeff, when you look at the acquisitions that he's made, it's pretty clear to me that Troy, at the very least, has done the best that he can to give this team a decent shot to be competitive this year.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, I'd give him, like, if you're asking me, like, what grade would I give Troy for helping the Pistons be competitive this season, I'd say B plus, B minus. If you're asking me what grade I give him for helping the Pistons in the long term, I'd say like A plus, because I think he's done a lot of great things there. But the one thing with the Jalen Duren move is that we're seeing that hole of Jeremy Grant that's missed on this lineup, right? Like Duren, like that, we are essentially, that Kemba Walker contract, we're eating that salary. And then in addition, we chose, to not, spend our salary cap on going and get big free agents that can improve this team this summer, right? Or even more role players and shooters or defenders, right? So that's a conscious decision that Troy Weaver made. What are your thoughts on that, Jeff?
No, I think it's fair. I mean, I only can grade Troy on 2 out of the 3 things you want to see. You want to see what he can do through trades, which we've seen. I think he's done an excellent job
Oh,
flipping
the
guys.
Bojan trade's a
Yeah, I
slam
mean, a
dunk.
straight fleece. And then I think getting Duren is a great trade. Even his first year here, being able to get Sadiq and Isaiah Stewart. So those things, I'd give him an A. I mean, his trades have been excellent. Next thing is drafting, which I think for the most part, everyone can say they're satisfied with what Troy's done. So that's another
To
A for
quote
me.
Michael Scott, at first I was going to give it an A plus, but then I forgot that there was an A plus plus.
Double plus for Troy, Mr. Troy. And then the last thing is free agency, which I think is incomplete. I mean, I'm not going to grade the man on, he hasn't had the funds, like you said, doing what he did with the Kemba contract, now extending Bojan. I think this offseason you're going to see more moves being made. So the free agency thing, I can't grade him based on that because he hasn't had significant money to be able to go out and spend. So with what Troy's assignment is, I think I give him an A. How he's approaching this rebuild, being patient, and no, what's up?
I was going to say, one thing you can say about the free agency thing and about like the salary cap management, one thing he did do is that they did commit to Bojan almost right away when he came to Detroit. Right. They signed that extension. And I know a lot of people are looking at Bojan as like the most likely guy to be like a trade piece or someone that, teams could offer, something in return for him. But in my opinion, Jeff, I think they like Bojan, and I think they see, I think they see the vision of how competitive this team could be with a draft pick, with cap space, and with him on the roster. In addition, with the media deal that's coming up and with the salary cap boom we're about to see in a couple years, that is an insanely small deal to have in the grand scheme of things. So like, if you look at that deal and like, what that brought as far as like, the stability going forward, I think that's a slam dunk.
And he's been true to what he's been telling us and telling the media. Like he said, I don't want a team full of young kids or 21 to 22-year-olds. Now you extend Bojan. And again, I want to extend Alec Burks. I would love Burks for the future as well. So again, those are pieces you can keep around. So, in terms of free agency, I think it's incomplete, but also to your point, you extend Bojan, you give him that. I think it's a fair contract. I love what they gave him. It's short term, but you keep a guy who's really been your best player without Cade. Yeah, I think you can give a pretty high grade for that one. So overall, man, Troy, to me, gets an A for how he's approached the rebuild, what he's done. He hasn't messed it up, and I think he's found enough talent to where the future is even more bright than it was before.
One thing we forgot to bring up with free agency, he signed Kevin Knox.
Oh yeah, well that's a great contract. 2 years, $6 million.
Well, yeah, and like in a team option on the second year.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you roll your eyes. It's like, oh yeah, but it's like, in all seriousness, Kevin Knox has been balling over the last few games. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. He's been the little spark off the bench lately. I criticized him earlier in the year, but I take that back. I think he's played really well so far last couple games.
Not
so
only that, Jeff, he's almost
shooting the hell out
seemingly
of the
take
ball. He
yeah, he
really
almost
is.
seemingly took Hamidou Diallo's role in the rotation,
Yeah. So
which
I think that deserves credit as well. You're right about that. We could fluff it a little bit, but he looks good. He's trending in the right direction. I think we can all
yeah,
safely say that.
again, I'm not saying Kevin Knox is this superstar or anything, but like he's given a solid like 15, 20 minutes a game with some pretty good defense. Like whenever Kevin Knox is in the game, it feels like at the very least he's helping the Pistons like make a run or stay in games.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. If he could play like this, Sean, that 3 million, he outplayed the hell out of that. So
Mhm.
I'm good with it.
Yeah, for sure. But again, I think it's going to be interesting to to see how that develops because 2 games in a row, you know, 2 DMPs for Hamidou Diallo. So interesting to see what's going to happen with that rotation. And speaking of rotations, a lot of Pistons fans' favorite criticism topics and conversations. Let's talk and end this video with everyone's favorite topic in the Pistons community, Jeff. Coaching. And we can break this. We already gave him a good grade on player development. So we already focused on that element. Let's talk about how Dwayne Casey's handled this season and what he's done. I'm going to give him a B plus to a B. And I know a lot of people are going to hear that and go, what the hell? Because they're going to go, Sean, have you seen the decisions he's made? Have you seen all the losses that we've had? I understand that. But again, what we talk about, like what the job is of a coach in a rebuild. It is to teach. It is to keep, keep the calm. It's to build the culture and it's to maintain, it's to maintain order. And when you look at what's happened with this team, even through the injuries, even through, the midst of all the, the things that have taken down rebuilds before, that have put rebuilds, behind and has shattered franchises in the past. Dwayne Casey is the guy that, he's the surgeon with the steady hand because he's been there a long time. He's not the guy that, is going to win coach of the year anymore. He's not,
Right.
this perfect coach. And you can certainly point at circumstances where he hasn't been perfect. But at the same time, he has to be borderline perfect for this team to win games.
Yeah.
So, especially with some of the disadvantages and things that he's been burdened with this season. So, I think overall, with what do you expect out of a rebuilding coach? Again, am I saying that he's going to be the coach that's going to lead us to the promised land? No, I'm not at all. I don't believe that. I believe he at least deserves a chance to get this get this team to a play-in or have a playoff series with this team. I sure as hell believe he deserves that. But at the same time, I'm not going to claim that he's our coach of the future. He's perfect for what we are right now. He's the Mark Jackson to the potential Steve Kerr. In my opinion, that's always going to be the comparison I make. But Jeff, I know I'm babbling.
No.
But what are your thoughts?
No, I think you make great points. And we agree with what you just said, which is the fact that Dwayne is not the coach of the future. I mean, it's not like you're saying that's a hot take. I mean, he's the second oldest coach in the NBA.
But there's nothing wrong with that either, though.
No, not at all. And again, for Dwayne, it's been ups and downs this season, but the player development, and I know people will say, Jeff, players aren't developing. I've heard that a lot, which I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you because I disagree. I think players are getting better, and I think the young guys, your rookies, are looking good. So I'll take that. But anyway, nonetheless.
People just see players developing as, are they showing up on your highlight reel on Twitter? Are they being tweeted by Legion Hoops with their crazy stats that they're having? Are they showing up in all-star games? That's not player development, man. That's just That's the glitz and glamour. If that's what you're looking for, that's not Detroit basketball. It never has been and never will be.
But to the rotations, yes. I think at times it is frustrating, but it all goes back to the same point, and you hit on this really well. Looking at what the cards or what he's been dealt, the cards he's been dealt, like the injuries he's had, he hasn't really had the roster has not been complete. It's been injury riddled. You guys have had to step up and play roles that they didn't have before the season, like Killian's our starting point guard, and when he's played well. But other guys, Isaiah Stewart missing 3 weeks, coming back and struggling, but now he's playing well at times. He's still inconsistent. He's not playing as well as he was before the injury. injury. And then you have Sadiq finding a role with Sadiq, Bojan being really the dude for this team. It's a lot that Dwayne's had to put together. And I do give him credit because for a team that was getting blown out early in the season, I think over the last 2 weeks, you can say that the performances have been better. They've played teams closer, even with a roster riddled with injuries in a tough Eastern Conference. So again, this is a team I expect to get 30 wins, even with Cade. So without Cade, I'm not going to sit here and demand that Dwayne takes his team to 30 wins. It's just not going to happen, in my opinion.
Even without Cade, they're still outpacing their record from last year as well.
Right. Even, with him healthy, they were struggling. So, again, there's a lot of gelling that had to happen this year, and you lost your franchise player. So it's not an ideal situation. But with what Dwayne's been given, I would give Dwayne probably a C if I had to say it. I think the player development pulls the other stuff that people want to question, because you said it best. He's the perfect coach for this situation. I'm not expecting Dwayne to, be this guru that can propel us 10, 15, 20 wins better than what we are. I'm looking at player development. What has he been given? Which clearly people can see this roster every single day. I mean, guys are playing like Kevin Knox emerged. We did not expect to see Kevin Knox this year. You finally got Burks back. He's playing well. Like Bagley finally returned from that knee injury. So again, things are getting put together, and I think Dwayne deserves credit for that. So again, and part of that too, when you look at the NBA, like people want to judge a guy like Dwayne Casey, but it's up to the players to go out there and execute. Like guys have to be able to make the right play, be efficient, be in the right positions defensively and offensively. And there's been times where the Pistons have not done that very well. And people can sit here and say, well, that's coaching. Well, no, that's not coaching necessarily. It could be youth. It could be inexperience, which is something he's dealing with. So I think that the situation Dwayne has, I got to give him credit. I think for the most part, we can all accept this team's not good and you're going to be in the lottery, and that's fine. But our players quitting on their coach. And I think all those guys play hard for Dwayne. So I'm not complaining.
Yeah, for sure. And, I understand the lower grade, and I definitely think that, especially, taking into account how the season began and, like where, like a lot of those tough losses, I think that's a fair criticism. I do also, there are certain things where you do wish that like, Coach Casey would maybe, make a decision or a transition sooner than you would maybe think. But at the same time, a lot of times when he's criticized for that patience, there's times where he's proven right. Like sometimes, like for example, with Killian, when Killian was struggling, past his first 10 games, a lot of teams would probably send him to the G League. He increased Killian's minutes. Like that's the difference. So, to me, like again, if you want to make a judgment on, whether or not, if on Dwayne Casey's basketball acumen, on what he can do come a playoff series, go right on ahead. But right now, that's not even what his job is.
Right.
That's not even what he's here for. And again, if you listen to what Tom Gores has said this season, you've heard what Troy Weaver has said this season, they've both maintained that they think that they think that Dwayne Casey's doing a great job. And the reason why is because he's the steady hand, and it's because he's doing exactly what this young roster needs. This isn't a Steven Silas situation. This isn't, this isn't a Jim Boylan situation in Chicago. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. So, and I think you said it best with the fact that what is Dwayne asked to do? What is he asked to do? And I think he's asked, to make these guys compete, play at least good basketball, not be blown off the floor, which they have at times. But for the most part,
he's building a culture too.
Absolutely. And how do you do that? By winning games. And there's been times where they've had good wins this year. You'd like to see more of them. But to your point, I love how you phrase it. What is he asked to do? This team isn't asked to go to the playoffs. They're not asked to go to the play-in. I mean, we kind of knew that. I mean, we've talked about that. That wasn't our expectations. So just depends what your expectations are. I think that's how you really feel about Dwayne for the most part.
For sure. And, and listen, at the end of the day, people can try and find, people to blame or things to blame for why this season has been the way it is. And, if you want to point fingers, go right on ahead. That's your prerogative. But, at the same time, I think there's just, you have to look at, what the bigger picture really is. And so overall, I think, there's still a lot of games left. There's still, 2/3 of the season. We're about 26 games through now. So like, there's a lot that can change. For all we know, Cade Cunningham could play basketball at some point this year. Probably not though. And like Detroit could make a trade at the trade deadline, probably not though. It's like a lot of
know.
things can happen, man. A lot of things can happen. And Jeff, when they do, what are we going to be doing?
We'll be covering it all. And by
We're
the
gonna be
way, people who aren't subscribed, if you're watching this video currently and you made it this far, please do that. Help the boys out. We make
Yeah, if you
content
made it
consistently.
this far and you're not subscribed, what the
What are you doing?
yeah, like listening to us talk for that long and not clicking that subscribe button, weirdo behavior. But anyway, speaking of weirdo behavior, that's what we are here from Half Court. So you should be sure you follow us and subscribe. You follow my boy on Twitter at Jet by Frey and also myself at Sean Half Court. But that's going to do it today, folks. We'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you subscribe.